The dust swirled in golden clouds across the Texas plain as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Jesse McCord sat astride his paint horse at the edge of the dried creek bed, watching the settlement of Redemption Springs shimmer in the heat waves that rose from the parched earth. He'd been riding for 3 days straight, and the weariness sat heavy in his bones, but he couldn't shake the feeling that had brought him here, that peculiar pull that felt almost like destiny. The town wasn't much to look at. A dozen buildings clustered around a dusty main street, their wooden facades bleached gray by the relentless sun. The saloon stood at one end, its painted sign creaking in the hot wind. At the other end, a general store and what looked like a boarding house. Between them, the usual assortment of establishments that made up frontier life: a blacksmith's forge, a stable, a small church with a crooked steeple. Jesse had been a cowboy for the better part of 15 years, ever since he'd run away from his father's failing farm in Missouri at the age of 14. He'd learned to rope and ride, to sleep under stars and wake to the lowing of cattle. He'd driven herds from Texas to Kansas, worked ranches from the Panhandle to the Rockies. He'd saved his money, lived frugal, and now, at 29, he had enough put away to start his own spread. He'd been searching for the right piece of land for months, and the valley beyond Redemption Springs had caught his eye on a map in Abilene. What he hadn't been searching for was a wife. That was something he'd figured would come later, once he had his ranch established, once he'd built a proper house instead of a lined shack. But fate, as Jesse was about to learn, had other plans. He guided his horse down the slope toward town, the animal's hooves kicking up small puffs of dust with each step. As he approached the main street, he noticed a commotion near the general store. A small crowd had gathered, and voices rose in anger. Jesse's hand instinctively moved toward the revolver at his hip, then relaxed. This wasn't his fight, whatever it was. But then he heard a voice that stopped him cold. "I don't care what you think you're owed, Mr. Hastings. My father paid his debts before he died, and I've got the receipts to prove it." The voice was female, clear and strong despite the obvious tension in it. Jesse found himself dismounting without quite meaning to, tying his horse to the hitching post and moving toward the crowd. He was tall enough to see over most of the gathered townspeople, and what he saw made his jaw tighten. A young woman stood on the wooden walkway outside the store, her back straight and her chin raised despite the fact that she was clearly outnumbered. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and skin the color of strong coffee with just a splash of cream. Her dress was simple but clean, mended in places but worn with dignity. Her eyes, Jesse noticed, were the most unusual shade of green, like creek water over stones. Facing her was a man Jesse immediately disliked. He was thick around the middle, dressed in clothes too fine for a frontier town, with a gold watch chain stretched across his vest. His face was red with anger or whiskey or both. Receipts can be forged. The man, Hastings, was saying, "Your father was a drunk and a liar, and everyone knows it. He owed me $300, and now that debt falls to you, girl. You can pay it in cash, or you can pay it by signing over that property of yours. My father was neither a drunk nor a liar," the young woman said, her voice shaking now, though whether from fear or rage Jesse couldn't tell. "And the property is mine, legal and clear. I've got the deed, filed proper with the territorial office. Deeds can be challenged," Hastings said, taking a step closer, "especially when they're held by someone like you. Half-breed squatter with no business owning good land." The slur hit the air like a gunshot, and Jesse saw the woman flinch as if she'd been struck. Several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. No one moved to help her. Jesse found himself moving before he'd made a conscious decision to do so. He stepped through the crowd, his spurs jingling with each step, and positioned himself between Hastings and the young woman. "Seems to me," Jesse said quietly, his voice carrying that particular tone of calm that men who'd lived by the gun learned to recognize, that if the lady says she's got receipts and a legal deed, then she's got receipts and a legal deed. Unless you've got proof otherwise, I'd suggest you back off. Hastings's eyes narrowed as he sized up Jesse. He saw a man worn lean by hard work, with sun-creased eyes and calloused hands, wearing dusty trail clothes and carrying his gun like he knew how to use it. "This ain't your concern, stranger," Hastings said, but he'd taken a step back. "I'm making it my concern," Jesse replied. "Now, do you have any actual proof of this supposed debt?" Hastings sputtered, his face growing redder. "My word should be good enough." "It ain't," Jesse said flatly, "not against receipts and a legal deed. So unless you want to take this to a proper court, I suggest you move along." For a moment, the tension hung thick in the air. Then Hastings spat in the dust at Jesse's feet and turned away, shouldering through the crowd. "This ain't over," he called back. "That land should belong to white folk, and I'll see it does." The crowd began to disperse, people returning to their business with the quick efficiency of those who'd learned not to get too involved in other people's troubles. In less than a minute, Jesse and the young woman were alone on the walkway. She turned to face him, those green eyes studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. Up close, he could see the fine bones of her face, the proud line of her jaw, the fullness of her mouth. She was, he realized with a start, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fashion or artifice, and everything to do with strength and spirit. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to do that. Couldn't stand by and watch a bully work," Jesse said, suddenly feeling awkward. He pulled off his hat, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Name's Jesse McCord. I'm just passing through, looking at land in the valley. Resita Delgado," she said, offering her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused from work. "Though most folks around here call me Rosa, and you might want to reconsider settling in this valley, Mr. McCord. It's not particularly friendly to strangers, or to people like me." "People like you," Jesse echoed. She gave him a look that was half amused, half bitter. "I'm half Mexican, half Comanche. My father was a trader who married my mother when she was cast out of her tribe for loving him. We've been living on a small ranch about 5 miles from here for the past 10 years, or we were, until my father passed 3 months ago. Now men like Hastings think they can run me off, take what's mine." Jesse frowned. "What does the law say?" "The law?" Rosa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The sheriff is Hastings's cousin. The judge comes through once every 3 months, and he's not likely to side with a half-breed woman over a white businessman, receipts or no receipts. Out here, Mr. McCord, the law is whatever powerful men say it is." "That ain't right," Jesse said. "No," Rosa agreed. "It ain't, but it's the way things are." She studied him for a moment longer, then seemed to make a decision. "You said you're looking at land, you looking to start a ranch. That's the plan," Jesse confirmed. "I've got enough saved to buy a small spread, stock it with cattle. I've been working other people's ranches long enough. Time to build something of my own." "The valley beyond town has good grazing," Rosa said. "Water year, down from the springs, shelter in the hills for winter, but most of the best land is already claimed. What's available is either too rough or too expensive." Jesse nodded. He'd already figured as much from his initial scouting. "I'll find something," he said. I'm a patient man." Rosa bit her lip, and Jessie could see her thinking, weighing options. Finally she spoke. "Mr. McCord, I'm going to make you a proposition, and I want you to hear me out before you say no." "I'm listening," Jessie said. "My ranch is 200 acres of some of the best land in the valley. Good grass, water from a creek that never runs dry, a sturdy house and barn. My father built it to last, but I can't hold it alone, not against men like Hastings. I need help, legal help, the kind that comes with a man's name on the deed, and you need land." Jessie's heart began to beat a little faster. "What exactly are you proposing, Miss Delgado?" She met his eyes steadily. "Marriage, a business arrangement. You marry me, your name goes on the deed alongside mine, and you get half of the ranch. We work it together, build it up, and we both benefit. I get the protection of a husband's name, and you get the land you're looking for without having to buy it." Jessie stared at her, stunned. He'd heard of such arrangements before, practical marriages of convenience on the frontier. But he'd never expected to be offered one himself, and certainly not within an hour of arriving in a new town. "Miss Delgado," he began, then stopped, unsure what to say. "I know it's sudden," Rosa said quickly, "and I know you don't know me, and I don't know you, but I'm out of options, Mr. McCord. Hastings will find a way to take my land unless I have legal protection, and the only legal protection that matters out here is a husband. I saw the way you stood up to him just now, saw that you're not a man who tolerates bullies or injustice. That tells me more about your character than a year of courting would." "You'd marry a complete stranger to keep your land?" Jessie asked. "I'd do anything to keep my land," Rosa said fiercely. "It's all I have left of my father, of my mother. It's my home. It's where I belong. And yes, I'd marry a stranger if that stranger was a good man who'd treat me fair and help me hold what's mine." Jessie turned away, looking out at the dusty street, his mind racing. It was madness, what she was proposing. He'd known her for all of 10 minutes. He knew nothing about her except that she was brave and desperate and willing to fight for what was hers. But then again, what did he have to lose? He'd been alone for 15 years, drifting from place to place. He'd been looking for land, for a place to put down roots, and here it was, being offered to him on terms that were more generous than he had any right to expect. "I ain't wealthy," he heard himself saying. "I've got about $800 saved. I was planning to use it to buy stock." "We could use it to buy stock for our ranch," Rosa said. "We'd be partners." "I ain't cultured or educated," Jessie continued. "I can read and write and cipher, but that's about it. I've spent my whole life working cattle." "That's exactly what this ranch needs," Rosa said. Jessie turned back to face her. "I ain't white," he said quietly, echoing the words he'd heard whispered behind his back more times than he could count. His mother had been Irish, his father English, but Jessie had been born with darker hair and darker eyes than most, with skin that tanned deep brown in the sun, and people talked. Rosa's expression softened, and for the first time he saw something like warmth in those green eyes. "Neither am I, Mr. McCord, but I can satisfy the law's requirements for a legal marriage, and so can you. That's all that matters." Jessie found himself smiling despite the absurdity of the situation. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious," Rosa confirmed. "You'd be my wife," Jessie said, testing the words. "We'd be married." "In name and law," Rosa said. "I'm not asking for, I mean, we could have separate rooms. This would be a business arrangement, nothing more, unless in time we decided otherwise, but that would be our choice, made free and clear." Jessie studied her face, looking for any sign of deception or hesitation. He found none. This was a woman who knew her own mind and wasn't afraid to speak it. That was rare enough to be precious. All right. He heard himself say, "I'll do it. I'll marry you." Rosa's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't quite believed he'd agree. Then a smile broke across her face, transforming it, and Jessie felt something shift in his chest. "Tomorrow," she said, "we can ride to the next town over, where there's a proper minister who doesn't owe Hastings any favors. We'll do it legal and right. Tomorrow." Jessie agreed and sealed his fate. They were married the next afternoon in a small church in the town of Silver Creek, 20 miles from Redemption Springs. The minister was an elderly man with kind eyes, who asked no questions beyond the necessary ones. Rosa wore a dress that had belonged to her mother, white cotton embroidered with small flowers in red thread. Jessie wore his best shirt, cleaned and pressed at the boarding house that morning. They spoke their vows in steady voices, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jessie kissed Rosa's cheek gently, respectfully. Her skin was warm beneath his lips, and she smelled of soap and sage. The ride back to the ranch took most of the afternoon. The property was everything Rosa had promised and more. The house was small but solidly built, with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a stone fireplace, and a kitchen. The barn was in good repair, with space for horses and storage for hay. The land rolled away in gentle hills, covered in thick grass, and Jessie could see cattle grazing in the distance, maybe 30 head. "My father's herd," Rosa explained as she showed him around. "I've been managing them myself, but it's hard work for one person. We'll need to hire on some help come spring roundup. We'll manage," Jessie said, and liked the sound of it. "We, not I." "We." That night, Rosa prepared dinner while Jessie tended to the horses. They ate together at the small table, speaking little but comfortably. Afterward, Rosa showed him to the second bedroom, smaller than the master but clean, and furnished with a bed and a dresser. "This was my father's room after my mother passed," she said. "I've been sleeping in the other one, but if you want the larger room, I can move my things." "This is fine," Jessie said. "More than fine." Rosa nodded, hesitated at the doorway. "Mr. McCord, Jessie, I want you to know that I meant what I said. This is a business arrangement. I don't expect, I won't demand." "Rosa," Jessie said gently, interrupting her awkward stumbling. "We're married now, legal and proper. That makes us partners. We'll figure the rest out as we go, all right. No expectations, no demands. Just honest work and fair dealing." The relief on her face was palpable. "Thank you," she said softly. "Good night, Jessie." "Good night, Rosa." Jessie lay awake for a long time that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around him. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. The wind whispered through the eaves. In the next room, his wife, a woman he barely knew, slept. He'd done some crazy things in his life, but this might top them all. Still, as he drifted toward sleep, Jessie found he had no regrets. There was something right about being here, about Rosa, about this land. He'd spent 15 years searching for a place to belong. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found it. The next weeks passed in a blur of hard work and slow discovery. Jessie threw himself into the ranch work with the dedication of a man who'd finally found his purpose. He rode the property lines, repaired fences, checked the cattle, and made plans for improvements. Rosa worked alongside him, proving herself every bit as capable as any cow and Jessie had ever known. She could rope and ride, brand and doctor cattle. She knew the land intimately, every water source and sheltered valley. They worked well together, Jessie discovered. They didn't need many words. A gesture, a nod, and they understood each other. In the evenings, they'd sit together after dinner, and Rosa would tell him about her parents, about growing up between 2 worlds. never quite belonging to either. Jesse shared his own stories of life on the trail, of the places he'd been and the things he'd seen. Slowly, carefully, they became friends. Hastings, true to his word, didn't give up. He filed a complaint with the territorial office, challenging the deed. He spread rumors in town about Rosa, about Jesse, about their marriage. He tried to buy up the water rights to the creek that ran through their land. But with Jesse's name on the deed and their marriage legal and recorded, there was little Hastings could actually do beyond making their lives difficult. Jesse handled it with quiet determination. He filed counterclaims, documented everything, and made sure their legal position was unassailable. He also made it clear, through both word and action, that anyone who threatened his wife would answer to him. The town's attitude began to shift, grudgingly. Jesse was white enough, successful enough, determined enough that people had to acknowledge him. And if they acknowledged Jesse, they had to acknowledge Rosa. It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was a start. 3 months after their wedding, as winter began to settle over the valley, Jesse and Rosa were working together to bring the cattle down from the high pastures. They'd been riding since dawn, and the sun was beginning to set, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of pink and gold. Rosa pulled up her horse on a ridge overlooking the ranch, and Jesse joined her. From here, they could see the house with its chimney smoking, the barn and corrals, the cattle spreading across the valley floor like dark stones in the gathering twilight. "It's beautiful," Jesse said softly. "It's home," Rosa replied. Then, after a pause, "Our home." Jesse turned to look at her. The setting sun caught her face, highlighting the strong bones, the determined mouth, the green eyes that had haunted his dreams for weeks now. She'd become more than a business partner to him, more than a friend. She'd become the first thing he thought of when he woke and the last thing before he slept. "Rosa," he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. She turned to meet his gaze, and something in her expression told him she knew what he was about to say. "I know this started as a business arrangement," Jesse said slowly. "I know we made no promises beyond legal protection and fair partnership, but somewhere along the way, things changed for me. You changed things for me. I find myself thinking that maybe, if you were willing, we could make this marriage more than just a name on a deed." Rosa's eyes shone with sudden tears. "I was so afraid you'd never say that," she whispered. "I've been falling in love with you since the day you stepped between me and Hastings, since you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth defending." Jesse dismounted and helped her down from her horse, his hands gentle on her waist. They stood facing each other in the fading light, both of them trembling slightly. "I ain't white," Jesse said, remembering that first conversation, that moment when she'd turned his own words back on him. "I ain't perfect. I'm just a cowboy who's spent his whole life working other people's land. But I can love you, Rosa. I already do. And I ain't white either," Rosa said, her voice breaking slightly as she smiled through her tears. "But I can satisfy your heart, Jesse McCord. I can be your wife, your true wife, if you'll have me." Jesse smiled then, the kind of smile that came from deep in the soul. "I already called you my bride," he said. "Now I'm calling you my love." He kissed her then, properly this time, and she kissed him back with all the passion and hope and fierce determination that defined her. They stood on that ridge as the stars began to emerge, two people who'd found in each other what they'd been searching for all along: home, partnership, love, and belonging. Below them, the ranch spread across the valley, theirs together, built on honesty and hard work, and the kind of love that grew from friendship and respect. It wasn't the story either of them had expected to live, but it was theirs, and it was true. Jesse McCord had come to Redemption Springs looking for land. He'd found that, and so much more. He'd found a partner who could match him in strength and spirit. He'd found a home worth fighting for. He'd found a love that transcended the narrow prejudices of the world around them. And Rosa Delgado McCord had found what she'd needed all along. Not just protection or a name on a deed, but a true partner, a man who saw her for who she was and loved her not despite it, but because of it. Together, they would build an empire. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they were stronger than they'd ever been apart. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow and sage across the valley. Winter was coming, but they'd weather it together, as they would weather all the seasons of their lives. Partners, friends, lovers, husband and wife, the story of the cowboy and his bride had only just begun.